Ahoy VC, welcome to the Personal Oasis. This is The Blind Island. I'm your host Isaac, and today we are going to be doing another album review of Tim Buckley's Lorca. Released in 1969, this was a turning point for Tim Buckley as a creative artist. Tim Buckley had gotten his start as an incredibly young man. I believe he came out with his first self-titled album in 1966 at the age of 19, and was known for his high octave range and for basically being a folk rock pop songwriter. His self-titled album was definitely more in the Simon & Garfunkel vein of music and played a little safe. When he came out with Goodbye and Hello, he continued to push his boundaries, working with a poet lyricist and creating a psychedelic Baroque album that many people love. I think that it's really, really well done. However, it is incredibly messy. Some of the lyricism definitely does bog down the grander points of the record because he gets more tied up in how he's getting these lyrics out than focusing on his voice, which is truly the part that I find to be the most intriguing portion of Tim Buckley. Then he came out with an album called Happy Sad, which started to push off into a different vein, a different venture. He was starting to really get into the music of jazz and John Coltrane, Ornette Coleman, Albert Ayler, free jazz. Happy Sad, you started to hear elements of jazz being incorporated into his music. And then in 1969, he came out with two albums. One was called Blue Afternoon, and the other was this. Blue Afternoon came out shortly after this and completely alienated his audience. Blue Afternoon was more of a step back to his earlier work, whereas this was a continuation into the free jazz elements that he was already starting to play with and start with. And a lot of people did not buy these records because they fell in love with the folk rocker, and now he's becoming this avant-garde experimental jazz based musician. But I think that they were missing out on an amazing transformation of an artist who continued to push himself forward, that really did kind of mirror the path that David Bowie would be taking later on, constantly changing himself and performing in a new skin each time. Now that I've given a little background information, let's get into my thoughts and observations of this record. Now, Tim Buckley had already started to push away from traditional pop rock sounds on Happy Sad, but on here he continues to bend and break the rules. The shortest song that's on here is 5 minutes, 55 seconds, almost 6 minutes long. The others extend over the 7-minute mark into the 9-minute mark. The lyricism on here is incredibly experimental, avant-garde, and it obfuscates a traditional interpretation. You need to listen to it multiple times in order for the meaning to wash over you. It almost has the feeling of a Picasso painting. The songs are painted in pieces, and you have to kind of take a look at it and hear it from different angles in order to put the entire picture together. He continues to stretch his voice to be the main instrument on here. The production value on here is more stripped back than it's ever been. He is usually only paired with an acoustic guitar and an electric guitar. Very, very little else is given much attention other than his voice on this record. He would turn coarse while still continuing on into even more crazy experimental places and even more bombastic sounds on his next album, Star Sailor. But this was the point in which he really started to see how far he could take his voice and be the instrument in which people want to wrap themselves around. One can't help but just see how he's taking his vibrato and trying to pierce into something, tap into something that the listener has never quite heard before. It is amazing that such a young man was really trying to enter into this, and he sounds much older than I believe he was only 22, 23 years old when recording this. Sounds much, much older. He was already in the midst of a horrible heroin addiction and starting to dive deeper into his darker demons. And the album artwork really does show what he was like, this darkness and this gray color piercing out of like this white oblivion. And that is what his voice sounds like, this dark, piercing rattle in the midst of oblivion. An incredible listen, but definitely not one that is one that you would throw on at parties, one that you would even throw on most days. It's a very particular type of album where you need to have the right mood and the right moment in order to listen to it. Now, album highlights to me are Anonymous Proposition, incredible vocalization on here, beautiful, beautiful stretching of his vocals, stretching of his vowels. He takes these words and almost creates new meanings within them. And the lyricism on here is haunting and gets under the skin. Mysterious lyrics like, "Love me as though one day you'd hate me." And I think that's very intriguing to listen to, and I'm going to include a small needle drop so you can hear what that sounds like. Love me as if someday you'd hate me. And my next highlight would be Drifting. It has this sort of desert quality feel to it, as though the sands are drifting across the dunes of a desolate landscape. And his voice is a lone rider going through that landscape with bongos lightly touching and the electric guitar sliding around. It really does capture this mysterious longing that's within the track. And I'm going to include a little needle drop to give you a taste of that. Drifting like a dream. My final thoughts on this record is that this is an incredible work of art. Art is not something that is always beautiful. Art is not something that is always pleasant even to look at, but it is something that's important and special. And Tim Buckley was one of those people who could create something that you could just swing along to, and other times make you sit and think deeply about. And I think that this is one of those albums where you're going to sit down, think on it, and it will haunt you deeply after you listen to it. I'm going to give this one a 4.5 out of 5. It is not for everyone. It is not even an album I would suggest for a summertime listen, but it's one that is very special and important in the history of art rock music. So guys, what did you think of the review? Have you listened to this album? What are your thoughts on Tim Buckley? Let me know in the comments below, and I hope you have a great day on your own personal oasis. Cheers.